My name is Sam Gubka. I'm waiting for her to give me a cue for the camera. Thanks, Rachel. I am the Philanthropy and Community Engagement Officer here at the International Refugee Assistance Project, also known as IRAP. Woo! I was gonna make a joke with that annoying person who makes you like clap again or like keep clapping one more time, you know, to say good morning and we say good morning again, but we're not gonna do that. So I got kind of laid back. We're so excited to have you all. Thank you so much for coming. I know it's a busy time. It's a Thursday, 12 p.m. on a Thursday. It's scorching hot outside. Like, I think this is the hottest day of the year, and it just so happened to be today. But hey, thank you for making it, and I hope you're enjoying the food that we have. I wanted to say a few things, but the first thing I did want to share with you all is I want to recognize the privilege that we're in right now. We are witnessing the weapons around the world, and I just want to take a moment for us to recognize the fact that we're in a safe space, that we have delicious food, that we have clean water, that we're in an air-conditioned area, that we're surrounded by wonderful people, and we are in a safe space. And unfortunately, that is a luxury that is not guaranteed to a lot of people, and many people want to experience it, sadly. But that's why we're here today. Today is a very special day. Today is June 20th, which also marks World Refugee Day. That's never about to stop. We're going to keep going. Today is a very special day. We decided to host an event to honor World Refugee Day because we know that there are a lot of people who are watching what's happening in the news and asking themselves, what can I do to help? How can I be part of something? And we thought this was a perfect opportunity for us to come together as a collective, to unite, have a good meal, and then hopefully do something great for people that are experiencing displacement. Here at IRAP, we are a free legal aid advocacy organization where we provide free representation and counseling for people seeking safety. And I know a lot of you have a connection to IRAP one way or another. Some of you are supporters, some of you are partners, and we'll get into that. But I just know that you're here, that means that you care about this issue, that you care about helping people around the world. And I think that that's a really, really beautiful thing, and I'm really honored to be with you all here today. So thank you for that. We have a lot of treats today, but before we get into some of the treats, we do want to talk about the bigger thing of why we're also here. So as I said before, a lot of people don't have this luxury that we have. Currently, there are 120 people who are experiencing displacement. 40% of them are children. And a lot of us, we look at those numbers and we think about them and we're like, well, what can we do? Well, at IRAP, we've been able to help 42,000 people find that place to safety, and we're still going. And that's why we want to make sure that we continue to work together as a collective, so we maximize our impact, hopefully. And that was part of a campaign that we started called the Are You In campaign. And some of you have been hearing me talk about Are You In, Are You In? Like, am I in for what? What am I in for? You're in for helping people find pathways to safety. You're in for unifying families. You're in for helping people be with those that they love most. You're in for people start a new life. And that's what it's all about. And today, we have a beautiful program for you. I do want to highlight that we are joined by some very special people, someone who actually made a whole international trip. I want to highlight Hila, who is our HR manager in our Jordan office. Give it up for her, joining us from Jordan. For those of you who don't know, IRAP has offices in Berlin, Germany. We have offices in Amman, Jordan, Beirut, Lebanon, Washington, D.C., and our headquarters here in New York City, which I will say is probably the best office. Yeah. And we are joined by many, many, many people. If you are a pro bono firm partner, please put your hand up. Woo! Woo! Good for them. If you are a family of a staff person, please put your hand up. I know there's one. Woo! If you are friends of a staff member, put your hands up. I'm looking at you. Yeah. And if you are an IRAP staff member, please put your hand up. Woo! So if you have questions, ask them, not me. And we also are joined by many staff members and colleagues of ours online. Hi, everyone who's watching us. We wanted to ensure that everyone was included. We have staff across America, and there's also folks joining us from some of the offices that I listed before. So it's really such a treat for us to be together on such a beautiful day. The food that you're eating today is catered by the Migrant Kitchen, and I hope you're enjoying it. We also have another treat for you at the end, but before that, we're going to get into a really, really exciting interview, and I'm going to bring up the person who's actually conducting it. My name's Rika Zvider. Okay. So, I did miss some of the people actually. I like the what. So someone I'm really excited about that is joining us today is actually one of my favorite people on earth ever. Her name is Zoe Abdelaziz. She is our speaker today, and Spencer will introduce her, but I'm so excited for you all to hear her speak about the work that she's been doing, and about some of the work that she's covered for IRAP. So if you can help me all, I'm going to be welcoming Spencer Tilger, who is IRAP's Media Relations Manager, working with clients, staff, and journalists to uplift the stories of IRAP's refugee clients. He coordinates IRAP's interdepartmental work on the U.S.-Mexico border and has lived and researched immigration trends in Guatemala and Mexico. Previously, Spencer led the media programs of the New York City-based immigrant rights nonprofits Justice in Motion and Immigration Equality. Please help me welcome Spencer.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to have all of you here today. The mic is a little intense. Okay, I'm going to project. So I help run IRAP's media program, and we are so honored today to have a very prolific journalist who has worked with IRAP on a few different projects before join us. So Rueda Abdelaziz is an investigative reporter at HuffPost, where she spearheads the coverage of Islamophobia and its intersections with politics, culture, and gender. Her notable works exposing anti-Muslim policies have led to the reunification of families, the reopening of hate crime cases, and her reporting has been recognized internationally, where she's won the 2024 Wilbur Award of Excellence, the 2022 Goldizer Award, and was awarded the prestigious Journalists of Color Reporting Fellowship by the Investigative Reporters and Editors. In her free time, she mentors young journalists and travels the world to discuss her reporting. So thank you so much. Please give a huge hand. Okay, is the mic working or should we just...
Keep trying.
Alright, so today we are going to turn the tables a little bit and have the person who does the interviews get interviewed. So again, it really is an honor to have you. Just one of the best in the game. And so you covered immigration, Islamophobia, and the intersections of all those things for many years, 10 years at HuffPost alone. And we want to know, what was your personal journey to writing about these issues, and what trends or things have you noticed over this career-long of reporting on these issues?
It's a great question. Thank you all for having me. I'm so excited to be here. This incredible setup out of a place that I've interviewed and worked with for a long time now. Spencer and I were chatting. And so at HuffPost, I spearhead the coverage of the intersection of immigration, Islamophobia, and just racism, which is 3 very broad topics on its own. And so covering it from a very specific angle was really important to me growing up. As a daughter of immigrants who has family members who are refugees, someone who grew up as, what we call a post 9/11 kid, I really saw firsthand the impact of when media covers this very specific community in a very certain way, be very, PC here, the impacts that has on people's lives. We're talking about discrimination in the workplace, children being bullied at school, to things like policies being able to be placed that demonize and target a specific community. Now, these trends are not new. We've seen them happen over the course of the founding of this country, depending on who's coming in and who's coming out. But it was really important to me to highlight that the policies that are getting passed in DC, that the conversations that we're having in media, even at home and school, really impacts somebody's life. And that is not an exaggeration whatsoever. And you do promote this very well. And I think about the story that we worked on quite recently, a couple of months ago, of an Iraqi mother. She was granted refugee status, with the help of IRAP. She's a client here. And after, she had successfully resettled to the U.S., she went back home to go visit her family. And when she found out that she wasn't allowed to return. Now, here is a woman who dotted all her I's, crossed her T's. She went through the refugee process, which, by the way, as many of you all know, is extraordinarily rigorous and difficult, and the vetting process and the emotional strain that one goes through to get here. But even after she got here, being a refugee never stopped for her, and it never stopped for her family. And so when she returned to Iraq, the United States suddenly told her, hey, you can send your minor children home. You're not allowed back. Now, this is someone who had gone through incredible lengths to receive safety here. She was facing threats on her life. Her father, she had family members who were actually killed. And yet, this concept of chasing safety never ended. And I think her story really encapsulates the challenges of our system, a system that's designed to help people. And still, the flaws are fatal. This is a woman who's now living in a country that she fled because of threats against her life and is told, stay there with your children or abandon your children entirely. Now, anyone who's a mother, and if you're not a mother, it's an impossible choice, right? And she said she would never do so. And so I think it's incredibly important to me to take these really complex ideas and to really break them down for a reader and have them recognize the very simple emotions that we all go through. This idea of looking for safety, the idea of never wanting to abandon your family, and the idea that our system is easy and simple and refugees just fly over here on a first-class ticket is preposterous and furthest thing from the truth. And so I think my upbringing as someone who's first generation, as someone who knows what it's like to feel foreign, to feel demonized, it's really important that I reflect those same values in my artwork.
And I think you do it very well.
But
Yes, so we can all send that article to you if you'd like to read it later. And to this point of trying to make people understand how rigorous the refugee system is, how many hoops people have to go through to get here. My next question is really like, we are in an election season, which, for anyone working in immigration, is always a nightmare, but there's so much immigration coverage in the media. It's wall to wall, especially of the border. And yet, I think we all find working here that the average person actually understands very little about what the reality of the immigration system, of the refugee system is, what's actually happening on the ground. And so I'm curious, in your opinion, kind of what are those misconceptions people have? And then how do you, as a journalist covering this, actually try to address that?
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think one, it's impossible to cover them all, even in one's career lifespan. And misconceptions that I'm sure people in the audience know much better than I do, but there's so many. And I think what's so difficult about covering this topic in an election cycle is that it is the time where people are trying to get support from voters, and perhaps are putting out the ads and putting out scary things about the type of people crossing our border, and then what the laws actually are get very muddied, right? And the other difficult thing about immigration is that it truly is a nonpartisan nightmare, right? People just assume you have, a Democratic administration, and that's somewhat it's easier, and you have a Republican administration, then it's more difficult, right? But that's actually not the case. The challenges exist on both sides, and the nightmares exist on both sides. It's just a matter of how widely is it known, how people are talking about it. But like all form of immigration and social justice issues, it's not the people at power, but it's the climate, it's the world events, it's the conversations, it's the day in and day out. An immigrant or a migrant or asylum seeker may not necessarily care who's in power, right? But they care about the rights and the laws being upheld for them. And so I think a lot of the misconceptions we see is, first of all, I think just the nature of the conversation, the fear-mongering that happens to happen, the conflation of a migrant versus a refugee versus an asylum seeker, right? And that they have all very different pathways. And I think, one that I think about quite often, which is like the simplest thing that people always forget, that seeking asylum is a right. It is a right protected by law, by U.S. law and by international law. So this idea of presenting yourself at the border, right? Just like, well, why don't you just apply for refugee status or apply for asylum back in your home country? They're allowed to do that, right? They're encouraged to do so. And yet I think seeing that fear mongering is incredibly disappointing, expected. But what I find to be most frustrating as a journalist is the lack of clarity in a lot of the stories, right? Like, how many stories have we read where it said quite plainly that what a refugee or an asylum seeker was doing was within the bounds of the law, right? Instead, people want to focus on how they got there and not the fact that it was completely legal for them to get there. And instead of where they're going, but the inhumane conditions that they faced, whether that's at the hands of our government or prior. And this idea that somehow that these people were getting the worst of the worst, right? Like the people who are trying to enter this country are bad people with criminal records and history. That's just statistically not true. And that the majority of immigrants here in the country have come here illegally. That's also just statistically not true. The data points otherwise. That they take our jobs, that they're removing the foundations of this country, whereas it's because these same people, this country exists, right? It's because of these people that this country is able to thrive. And so I think the fear mongering is incredibly frustrating, and the lack of clarity in most stories. And I think, there's so many, but to list off just the thoroughness of our system. If you talk to any refugee and ask them how many interviews they've been through, the medical checks, the 2 or 3 times over, the very tight window, they have to go through so much to prove that they are worthy and deserving. And so when they finally get here, to question them, I think is a slap in the face. It's humiliating, and it's not just illegal, but completely unfair and immoral. And so I think knowing all that gets thrown out the window for political points is a disservice to what this country promised would do to people who are seeking safety and shelter. It is illegal. It is data-wise statistically not true, and it's a lot more complex than people think. I think the flattening of this conversation to poise one candidate better as the other on both sides is a mischaracterization at best.
Yes, exactly. Could not agree more. And I think that what you do a really good job of is, centering the people and their human story in all the reporting that you do. And it's not just what one candidate says about immigration generally or any of that, but it's about the actual experience of people. And I think that's what we try to do at IRAP, and I think what you do in your report as well.
Appreciate that. And we think about it just for ourselves, right? When you're scrolling on social media, ask yourself, what are the stories that you tend to reshare, right? Mm-hmm. If you are emailing someone a really great piece, or you're talking about it over the dinner table, we as humans, we're inclined to learn about other humans, right? Yeah. We want to know not just a person's struggle, but where they've come from and their dreams. It's what makes our society. So I think about that a lot in my reporting, because I can write a story explaining the letters of the law, but oftentimes the reader's not going to want to read that. Yeah. And so thinking about it from a mutually beneficial perspective, we want our society to be more educated, right? So we can make better decisions at the polls. We can make better decisions at home. We can make better decisions when we're involved in our community. It's my job as a journalist. But at the same time, it's also really important to recognize that we're talking about people, right? People's lives, people who have children, people who have jobs, people who have friends, and to just use them as political pawns or ads on our TV spaces is dehumanizing, and I think is just bottom of the barrel activity that no one should accept.
Yeah, 100%. I want to go into one specific issue. This is, an event, the push to talk about IRAP, and So IRAP, one of the things that we became known for was in 2017 when former President Trump introduced the Muslim ban. IRAP organized lawyers to go to the airport and fight the fight to stop this discriminatory policy. And you have done really amazing work on the continued impact of this policy. And IRAP has been working on the legal side for now 2 administrations, the continued impact. And I think it was in 2022, you issued an investigation about how this thing continues to, every day, affect people still to this day. And so could you tell us a little bit about that reporting?
Yeah.
And especially now that, we're looking at potentially Muslim ban 2.0 is really more like 4 or 5.0, but if Trump is reelected. So
yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. So I had written this investigation after I had written so many individual stories about different people who were impacted by this policy, right? And I was frustrated by the lack of just bringing together, really connecting the dots. And so I started a year-long project. I said I was going to collect as many stories and as many data points as possible to really paint the picture of the impact of this ban. Now, this is also a ban that people still argue that is not discriminatory, right? These countries where supposedly random, that's so randomly listed, that the impact is not as dire as people seem to be, that is quite small in scale. So I said, you know what, we're gonna try to build something to prove otherwise. So the year-long story that was published on the anniversary of the ban, 5-year anniversary, had 2 parts to it. There's a data component where I collected nearly 900 cases of people who were impacted by the ban, most of them here in the US, but also internationally, but also really went behind the numbers to really draw those impacts, right? And of them, it really went into just the hardships that people face. And hardships is such an understatement because these are people whose lives were changed. I interviewed a Yemeni father who was unable to bring his children to the US. He had lost a child who died in Yemen because he couldn't get adequate care here in the US on time, and the struggles that he faced. And I interviewed a young, brilliant Iranian woman who was granted a diversity visa to come study here in the US, and both of them whose lives were upended. And so it was really important for me to draw just the mental health impacts, the actual physical loss of life, the permanent separation of families, the wife who had to give birth without her husband, the man who died by suicide because he was denied the visa to come to the US, and all of these stories to draw out that, one, we are targeting a very specific population in the world. And then 2, that this impact is forever, right? This is going to be something that, our children's children are going to study and look back at and say, well, how did we allow for something to be in place that was so devastating? And both from a magnitude perspective, but also in just terms of the types of hardships, financial loss, medical loss, et cetera. And so it was really important for me to write that story, I think to draw that legacy, but also to connect the dots. So it's not just 1 or 2 sad stories, readers are reading in a couple of random places, but really to kind of have it all in one place. And that's why it's so important to me. And among collecting data, which is one of the heavier lifts, right? That we worked with IRAP, we worked with all of the other refugee resettlement agencies as well. We talked to lawyers, I interviewed activists, I interviewed families across the country, really all to build this data set to tell these stories. And I think doing that is so important. And again, it draws back to the concept of who are the people that we are targeting via policies, and how are they telling their stories? And after we tell their stories, how are they continuously impact day in and day out? Because oftentimes people assume being a refugee is getting that visa and entering the US, and then you're good, right? Like, you're in the land of the free economic opportunity, there's no prevailing world crisis of some sort, but the challenges continue. How do you live a life when your family's still living under bombs? How do you receive an education when the education here doesn't prioritize your accreditation because your university is seen as less than? How do you find housing and access to resources? How do you see your family again? How do you start a new life when people, not only in their teens, but in their 50s, 60s, or 70s, are telling themselves, or we're telling them, well, you need to start over, but you also need to thrive. You have to be worthy of us allowing you to be here. And that is a very heavy, very unfair, but a very real challenge that many people face, even after a simple policy is or isn't rescinded.
Yeah.
It's a really enlightening conversation. And people ask me all the time, and they're just like, do you get to write happy stories? And they don't come by. But when they do, and I think very similar to your work, I can assume I think it really makes the work worth it. It's a lot of gloom, it's a lot of sad, but I think if we don't do it, then we will.
Exactly. Do you have to celebrate the wins? I do want to open it up to all of you. I have a million questions, but if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand, and I think we have time for 1 to 2. And we can pass the mic. I think here it's authentic. All right, don't be shy. Everybody?
Who's such thing to question?
Bang. Anybody?
I mean, our conversation is going so well.
Yeah.
We've answered all of the immigration questions.
I see one. Oh, okay. All right, let me bring the mic over.
just gonna say we solved the what's problem.
Yeah.
Matt.
I could just steal this. My name's Christina Blacken, and this has been an incredible conversation and super informative. I would love to know what are 1 or 2 actions you think would be useful for all of us in terms of the election coming up. There's so many conversations like the doom and gloom of democracy is at risk and all these things, but I haven't heard a lot of prescriptive activities that we can do, and I would just love your opinion on the simple things or the bigger complex things that might be useful for this particular election.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. I think it's a great question. I'm going to have to answer that within the bounds of a journalist and not as a legal person. But I think oftentimes, just a little bit of doom and gloom, because that's my specialty. When we're asking ourselves these questions at a presidential election, it's sometimes too late by then, right? I think from a proactive stance, we really love to have people be well versed on these issues before they become the debate topics, before the ads on TV happen and the Twitter attacks and the drama and the flare, because that's always expected. But oftentimes when you know what the issue and where you stand, it makes it a lot easier and a lot clearer, right? I think the other thing that has been kind of unfair this election season is really poisoning people of like, well, if you don't do this or if you don't vote for so-and-so, right, you're going to cause the doom of all of us. And I think that's incredibly unfair, right? If you don't vote for this guy, then this bad thing is going to happen. If you vote for that guy, then that bad thing's going to happen. Well, bad things are going to happen regardless, right? Oftentimes, your one-party candidate is not going to solve the very complex systems that have been really thriving and growing, getting worse over the last since the founding of this country. And so I think taking a complex view to complex issues is important. And I think with that, I think my TLDR is the media literacy is really important. Oftentimes people who are voting on topics tend to read the same news source and therefore have the same opinions on whether that's immigration issues or otherwise. And so I think really encouraging people to be well-rounded and read the source that you wouldn't normally read. Read about the person who you disagree with, right? If not to debate with them, but also just to gut check your own personal biases on an issue or make your resolve even stronger. And so I think not living in bubbles is really important, and kind of breaking out of those bubbles on these hot take issues is really important. It's going to make you a better person, a better informed person, have better informed conversations. And then when the time at the poll comes, whether that's this election cycle or the next one in 4 years, you kind of have a little bit of more backing, a little bit more resolve and more nuance to an issue. And so that you don't have regret afterwards. And that, election season and cycle is just one part of the solution, right? It's very rarely going to be the solution to everything. And so the work starts way before, but it also continues very much after.
And I think I'll quickly add that I would definitely encourage, from the media perspective, everyone should read works like Rueda's that focus more on the actual policies and the people affected by them, instead of just repeating what one candidate says about the issue. Instead, try to learn really about the issue itself. And then I think our development department would be angry at me if I didn't say that IRAP, is prepared for whatever happens in the election, and it will be tough no matter what, to be honest. And so if you want to say that you are in, that is one very tangible way to help. And we have time for one more question, if anyone has one. We have time for two. I said, could we get both, and then maybe you can answer them both quickly?
Yeah, go.
Kevin and then Elham.
Hi, thank you very much. I think one of the main issues, and you touched on this, was, I think there's just a lot of confusion about sort of status, right? People get confused about what does it mean to be a refugee? What does it mean to be a migrant? What does it mean to be a person seeking asylum? And I think that sort of confusion, one of the I guess solutions may be to try to just make it simpler for the general population to understand the different categories that people fall into, whether it's voluntarily or involuntarily. Because I do think that there's a tendency to sort of lump everybody together and say, this is just a problem, without kind of breaking down the different categories. And I think that will probably be an issue as we, in this election season as well, where there's a lack of clarity as to what the policies are, and it's complicated. So when things are complicated, people tend to sort of avoid. They don't want to really do the research, do the homework, try to get a better understanding of not only the macro issues, also kind of but I think that sort of education process, I think, is very important, because if we don't have a little bit more clarity and education on that, I think the issue tends to get unresolved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed. Did you also?
Yeah, I mean, mine is more like a comment/question. So I recently joined IRAP to work on inclusion of space and people with disabilities or people with disabilities on the move. And I really like your intersectional approach. So I don't know if you have come across additional challenges that people with disabilities would face. And I just wanted to use this opportunity to highlight that, and hopefully in your future work would also consider this, because, you know, I myself, I mean, I'm also immigrated to the U.S. as a very Iranian woman with disability, so I kind of know some of these things that you were just talking about. So just wanted to use the opportunity to highlight that. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with the, you know, to both of your points, most definitely complex issues tend to get shied away from because it's too much or it's too wonky, and it doesn't fit in a 140 character tweet, right? Oftentimes people don't want to talk about it. It's about giving the hot take and going viral, or making a really good point online and then just it kind of ends there. No one wants to get into the wonkiness, and it does a disservice to the complexities of the issue and the type of people that come in. You know, it's very easy to just blanket cover a topic that's vast, that's immigration. It's a much harder, you know, and you requires a lot more patience to say, you know, well, one person's experience is going to be different from someone else. No one's saying that the system doesn't have flaws. If anything, the flaws are many, and too far to count. But also we're completely doing a disservice to the more unique aspects and unique stories, whether that is someone coming with a disability or someone, we were chatting earlier this morning about extracontinental migrants, right? People who specifically, it's been a surge of people leaving African and Asian countries and entering through our southern border, right? Taking that very arduous journey, right? That when people want to think immigration, they think a very specific, you know, Latin American population coming from the southern, you know, border in Texas, and it just ends there, right? We ignore all the other borders, we ignore all the other types of populations of people because it doesn't fit into the simpler linear thinking. So I think any way to challenge that is incredibly important. So I really appreciate both of you guys mentioning that.
Yes. And thank you again for speaking to us today. I hope it was informative for everyone. I know it was for me. And a big round of applause.
Thank you, Spencer. Take it away. Appreciate you guys. You gave her Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Christina, for asking your question. That was a great question, because we have more action items for you. And speaking of that, I'm going to be introducing Balkis Mihrik. I really hope I said it correct. I feel like I said it wrong. We went over this 1,000 times and we're friends and we're coworkers. Is the Senior Policy Advisor at the Refugee Advocacy Lab and Senior Policy Counsel at the International Refugee Assistance Project, IRA. The Refugee Advocacy Lab is a partnered initiative between IRA, Refugees International, and Refugee Congress that works towards growing the movement for U.S. leadership on the protection and inclusion of forcibly displaced people by developing strategic communication resources, championing inclusive policies, and building capacity on the ground. In her role, she provides strategic and technical support to state and local partners on issues such as reducing barriers on occupational licensure, access to in-state tuition, language access, and much more. Please give it up for Balkis.
Thank you, Sanat, for this opportunity, and thank you all for being here today. It's a real pleasure to see everybody join us, especially our external partners. I was asked today to speak a little bit about the Welcoming Refugees 2025 campaign, which is an action item that you could do, Christina, and everyone else. So what this campaign is, we've run it a couple times in the past. It started under the Trump administration, where we rallied state and local elected leaders, bipartisan leaders, including Republicans, to push back against some of the anti-immigrant and anti-refugee policies we saw at the federal level. Under the Biden administration, when Biden first came into office, the number that he set for refugee admissions was much lower than what we had anticipated, what was promised during his election campaign. And so we mobilized this campaign once again to push back, and he once again raised the number. In the last couple of years, we've been pushing the Biden administration to rebuild the U.S. refugee admissions program, which was not meeting the refugee admissions goal of 125,000 and was falling short. And so we ran this campaign in FY23, and it's been largely a successful campaign, of course, alongside the effort of regular constituents, organizations, nonprofits, resettlement agencies pushing the Biden administration to admit more refugees. So this year, we're actually projected to potentially reach the admissions goal. So our focus isn't so much on the number, but it's on protecting the refugee admissions program and asking Biden to ensure that the progress that we've made over the last 4 years is preserved. Our goal is to get state and local elected leaders from all 50 states, Republicans and Democrats. Unfortunately, we've been losing, given the current climate, Republican support or public support. They tell us privately that they support our issues, but they don't want to be public about it. And it's really important for our organizations and constituents to put the heat on our elected officials and tell them, no, we need to welcome refugees. And in fact, one of the things that we do at the lab is polling, and our polls have found that, amongst both Republican and Democrat supporters, that support for the refugee admissions program is higher with Democrats, but still the majority of Republicans do support refugee admissions, and that number goes up to 87% when people know a refugee. And so this work continues. We work with our partners, we work with refugee leaders, and we're asking all of you to go to welcomingrefugees2025.org, and there's a constituent action there where you just put your name, your address, and it automatically populates all your elected officials, and you can send them an email. So right now we have about 293 elected officials that have signed, and our goal is to get to 500. And we want them from all 50 states, and we also want to improve our Republican representation. And so we almost have all 50 states. We're only missing, I think, 5. And I don't know why Delaware is one of them. So if anybody has connections to Delaware, please send your emails. But we're also missing South Dakota, not surprising. Louisiana, also not surprising, but we should be able to get somebody. So if you even once lived there, you can, take our action and reach out to your electeds there. We're also missing Idaho and I believe Nebraska, which Nebraska, surprisingly, because I don't know, I think they have labor shortages. They've actually been very supportive of refugee issues over the last couple of years. And so we're really hopeful that we'll be able to clinch Nebraska. Currently, we only have 7 Republicans, which is very low. And so if you know any Republicans or you live in a Republican district, please reach out. I think it's really important for our elected officials to hear directly from constituents that we do support welcoming refugees. They do take into consideration what their constituents think, and I think they just don't hear enough from their populations. And it's usually the people who are anti-refugee and anti-immigrant that are motivated to speak. And so it's really important, just a simple email to your elected officials saying that you support welcoming refugees makes a really big difference. So I hope you all can participate. And yes, if you have
Just to clarify the web address again.
welcomingrefugees2025.org.
Got it.
If you go on our website, it's on our website, right? Comms team?
Yes.
Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you so much. Really powerful initiative that Baptiste is leading, and we're so grateful for her and for the entire team that's working on it. Definitely support that. Now, on to other action items that we can also take. I do want to take a moment, though, to recognize that one of our board members is actually here, Miriam Buell. Thank you for joining us, Miriam. I really am so happy to have had such wonderful people join us. Really just thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Dwayne. That was very, very insightful. I wanted to take a moment to talk about the campaign that we're also launching today. Some of you, if you are on our listserv, you may have gotten the email at 10 a.m. this morning. If not, we're going to get you signed up. We launched today the Are You In campaign,
which is a grassroots campaign to ask more people if they are in supporting this beautiful mission. Now, again, the fact that you're here means that you care about people, means that you want to spread that love. And we are relying on you to help us magnify that. We are going to be sharing with you a special treat. As I said, we've had lots of treats. Richie is kindly going to be assisting in passing out these treats for you that are cookies in the shape of a key. And the key is our promise to safety. So whenever you're looking at your keys and you want to go home, you always remember that you have a place to go, right? When you're looking at your keys. And so I want you to remember that again is not something that everyone has. So today, if you feel it and if you feel the love and you are inclined, we want you to support us, and you can make a donation. And we're going to be sharing a QR code with the cookie. If either Madison or Richie can pass those out now, that'd be nice. There's more stats on there. But again, I also want to ask you that it just doesn't stop with you. I want you to share this with people that you also love most. Think about the 5 people that you love most. Look at your hand. Pick each person for one finger. Maybe pick more. And then send them a text message. Send them that link that's going to be on the QR code that you're getting. And ask them and tell them, listen, I was just at this cool event at IRAP. IRAP does amazing work. They've been really impactful. And I want to be able to support more people fight safety. But I need your help. And I want you to send it to them and tell them I'm sending it to you because I love you so much. And I want more people that love each other to be together. And if that sits with you and that resonates, then I do ask you to please share that link. The link, if you want to go straight to it, it's refugeerights.org/RUN. And you can make any donation that you'd like. For those that are in corporate America, hi, there's matching gifts. And if you want to do that, and if you need help with that, let us know. We're more than happy to help you. And they're in the kitchen. Yep. You're going to be getting the cookies soon. I hope you guys enjoyed the food. I hope you've enjoyed the ambiance. I want to also allow for space for people to network and connect. And I want to take this time to thank the many people that helped bring this together. A huge, huge thank you to Richie from our operations team. This whole event started because Richie and I just happened to have coffee in the kitchen. And he was like, we need more engagement. And I was like, say less. And that it happened. I'm really, really grateful. Thank you, Richie. I'm really grateful for Madison, who came all the way from our Tanya, who also came from our DC office. Thank you, Laura, who came from Detroit. Thank you. I'm so grateful. Thank you to the entire comms team. Rachel came from DC this morning. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you so much for watching. We love you, Team Comms. Thank you to Anya, my manager, who's been supporting me so much, to Kelly, the director, and I hope I'm not forgetting one from Jacob. Thank you. This was really, really a team effort, and the idea was for all of us to come together and to just spread more love. So I hope that you're able to enjoy that. There's a ton more food. Please make some new friends, connect with old friends, and we're here. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.